We'll start off with a little bit of practice. So wherever you are, go ahead and settle into an upright seated posture. Or if you prefer to stand or lie down or walk, whatever you need to do to take care of your body. And we'll spend just a little bit of time in practice prior to moving into the rest of the event. Once again, establish a posture to use for practice. So at the base, the lowest part of the body, the legs, are firmly connected to the ground. And spine grows up out of that stable base like a tree, supporting an open heart and an elevated crown of the head, top of the spine. It's well worth taking some time to align the posture. We see that if we sit in a certain way, then it can be very easy or difficult to think. And try to find a way to sit so that it is difficult to think. Just for fun, let's try it out. See if it's possible to sit in a way so that it is difficult to think. Having established this posture, upright, magnificent, and also relaxed, easeful, we use this posture to feel what we are feeling right now. Feeling our feelings right now means that we're not trying to think about them. We're not trying to understand where they came from, why they're here. We're just experiencing them as they are. We spend a lot of time thinking about our feelings, trying to decide whether they mean that we're good or bad. Instead of that, for now, we're just feeling them. Naturally, this can be overwhelming. We find that we express as we feel our feelings. If we're able to do so without disturbing others, if we're in a place in which it's appropriate to do so, then of course we may weep, scream, run around, flailing our arms, try to move through our feelings. In any event, continuing to stay with them, experiencing them moment by moment. we find that it's too overwhelming, we need to think about our feelings for a little while, think about something else for a little while. Of course, that's reasonable. It's challenging to face feelings in this moment, or can be. And so allow that to happen. And whenever you're ready, return to direct sensations. Just experiencing this moment, body sensations. Oh, it's nice to see you. Uh, Nice to spend a little bit of time together, such as it is. Oh, I believe that the talk this time is about connection in crisis. And in particular, of course, in the currently most, let's say, salient crisis, coronavirus pandemic. How do we experience connection? How can we experience connection? Uh, Given current situation, how to connect? And I have a sense that this is actually quite a big question, since probably for many of us, we may be feeling a little bit more lonely than usual. We, of course, live in a world that is already, or was, let's say, already quite lonely. Maybe more lonely than at any other point in history. A world in which it's common for people to not have very many friends, certainly not friends who we can truly count on, truly trust. And this pandemic and the lockdown measures that have been put in place as a result have naturally exacerbated that for many of us, so that we're feeling more lonely than we have before. And we may think that this loneliness is a product of just not physically being able to see people, not being able to see the people we love, not being able to visit, meet with our friends and family. And of course, that's true. Uh, that is a major contributing factor. That is something that's playing into this. That we're not able to physically be with people we love is, of course, naturally a part of this. But I would actually suggest that that isn't the main part of it. Um, that this loneliness is actually, in a way, deeper than that. It isn't just about physical proximity and the lack thereof. It's actually more about uh, isolation from our feelings, isolation from our direct experience, and therefore isolation from others, isolation from the experiences of others. In my training, I've been doing monastic training for a little while now, and I've had a few opportunities to go into solitary training periods, solo retreats. Times when I've been all alone on my own, usually in a cabin or something, in which I haven't seen or talked to people for many days at a time. Talked to very few people, um, talked to no one really aside from my teacher, Soryu, for weeks or months. And during those times, and of course at other times, I've had the opportunity to study loneliness. That's one of the themes that has come up. And I've gotten to see how it's possible to be lonely around other people. And it is possible to not be lonely, to feel connected, in fact, extremely connected, when there's no one around. In fact, some of the times in my life that I've felt most connected, most the opposite of the emotion of loneliness, the opposite of the feeling of loneliness, most fulfilled, most in touch with all life, have been the times in which I haven't seen anyone else, in which there hasn't been a single person anywhere to be found. And I claim that that's because this loneliness is the experience of disconnection from our experience. It's the experience of unwillingness to experience our experience. And while naturally it's true, the lockdown, this crisis have produced more physical loneliness, more physical isolation, naturally. I would say that that hasn't been, again, the main thing. I think the main thing that I've been seeing and experiencing and moving through is that our experience has gotten more challenging to face at this time. And I think because the basic thing that we're trying not to face, the basic experience that we're running from, hiding from, obstructing, the one that we're afraid of is the experience of the understanding of our death. We are deeply afraid of our death. We have not come to terms with our death. Therefore, because our death is inevitable, we haven't come to terms with our life. We're not okay with reality. Because we're not okay with reality, we retreat from it into our world of thoughts, stories about things. And at this time, of course, maybe we retreat into the news, into opinions, into stories about the crisis. The problem is that all of this retreating is actually exacerbating the thing that we're retreating from. It's actually making the problem worse. We see that around here. We're, of course, in a monastic training community right now. Everyone here is regularly spending an hour or more a day doing the exercise that we all did at the beginning of the session, where we sit down and we just have this experience without anything to prevent it, without any way to get away from it. We just sit down and have to experience what we're experiencing for an hour or two a day. And we've seen in this little community how people have moved through that. So people come in for interviews and we say, I feel so confused and scared. There's so much fear. I'm scared of everything and I'm confused about everything. And I don't know if I can trust anything. Everything is suspicious and untrustworthy. And because of that, people usually don't say this part because it's implicit. For some reason, it isn't remarkable to us. We don't find that we should remark on it. Because of that, I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out why. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what's happening, thinking about my feelings, thinking about this place, trying to understand why everything is so frightening, why everything is so confusing, why everything is so suspicious, and spending a lot of time thinking about that. But the more I think about it, the worse it gets. The more frightening it gets, the more confusing it gets. This is because all of this mental activity, this thinking about it, is what is producing that confusion, that fear, that sense of deep fundamental suspicion, because we're cutting ourselves off from our direct experience again and again by retreating into mental fabrication. It's like a Chinese finger trap. You pull and pull and pull, and the more you pull, the tighter it gets. It seems like there isn't any way out. Or people are exhausted. People come in and say, I'm having a hard time staying awake. I keep falling asleep during the sit. It's because we're wearing ourselves out. We're spending our whole day freaking out about this situation, about the pandemic, about the measures that have been put into place, about the future, freaking out, and we don't have any energy left because we've given all of our energy, we've given our life force to this media, these stories, these ways of seeing things, these ways of construing things. Therefore, it's essential that we take time to intentionally feel what we're feeling, to intentionally face that. Intentionally facing that, we face our lives. We face what's happening right now for us and for others. Retreating out of our stories about others, out of our stories about ourselves, escaping from that. We come into this moment of experience. Coming into this moment of experience, we're then able to respond. We're able to actually move forward, to face reality. The reality often is, I'm afraid. This is often the reality. This is often the experience that we're running from. I'm scared, feel inadequate, insignificant. There isn't anything I can do. We just sit down and we face this experience without preventing it. Just this experience on its own can lead to a deep kind of fulfillment, a deep kind of happiness. We sit down and we face this fear, this unsatisfactoriness, this unsettlingness, this un-okayness with this experience, and we face it, and it just gets bigger and bigger. The more we face it, the more it grows. This is the experience that we've been preventing, we've been avoiding. We don't want to face this, but facing it, it grows and grows and grows, and we just keep staying on it. And at some point, we have to do something. At some point, we have to do something. We're finally able to acknowledge that this is the reality of the situation. We're having this experience and that it's not okay. Having faced this, it actually becomes possible to move forward in the practice. We become desperate enough to try to get out of our heads for even just a second. Get out of our stories for just a second. Doing this, we find a kind of joy, a kind of exhilaration, a kind of satisfaction. And then, of course, the fear comes right back even stronger. So we just throw ourselves in more. As we do this, it's commonly the case that we have the sense, I have to force it. It's commonly the case for us that it seems like in order to pay attention to our feelings in this moment, without paying attention to thinking, we have to force things. We have to make a big effort, exert, struggle, even fight with our experience in order to stop fighting with our experience. It seems like it is that way. We have to fight with experience in order to stop fighting with experience. We're confused about this because we are unwilling to acknowledge that we have already been fighting with our experience. We sit down and we do a practice like this, say, attend to the breath or the body sensations without thinking about anything, and it's hard, and so it feels like we have to force things. But we only have to force things because we're already forcing our experience into stories, into thinking. We're already making this huge effort to maintain this idea about how things are, about who we are, about who the other people are, about what the situation is. It's just that we're doing this all day long, and so we usually don't notice it. We're doing it all day long, and so it isn't salient, it isn't obvious to us. It takes, actually, quite some time before we are able to have an experience less forced than the experience that we have every day, the experience that we're accustomed to, that we're dragging around with us all day long. We've had that experience, though. We've actually gone beyond forcing. We've actually gone beyond manipulating to any extent. We then become aware that that is possible, that such an experience is possible to have. And then, although we might retreat back into fear, still, nonetheless, we see that that fear, that patterning, those stories are just conditionally arisen. They're produced by circumstances. They fall apart, given the end of those circumstances. So, why does this matter? What's the point? So what? We're afraid of death. What does that have to do with anything? There's a crisis. We have a major problem right now. There's a virus, it's spreading around, it's infecting many people. Well, the crisis that we are responding to right now is not the most urgent crisis in the world. It isn't the biggest problem in the world. Even in the worst case, some people are estimating that in a worst case scenario with coronavirus, we may have up to 50 million, maybe even 90 million deaths. This is nowhere near as bad as the climate crisis, which will kill billions of people and even more other life forms, other beings, animals. Will exterminate enormous numbers of living beings. And even that isn't as bad as the worst case for technological disruption. It isn't as bad as the possibility for technology to run unchecked and take over, make use of, co-opt, appropriate all of the matter in the world, all of the life in the world, in order to do meaningless things. But why is this the one that we're responding to? Why is coronavirus the crisis that has gotten us to actually change? Why is this the one that has gotten us to change our behavior? Which we have to acknowledge it has. This is actually quite exciting, empowering. We should feel proud of this. That in a matter of a few weeks, we have completely changed our entire society, our entire world, totally restructured everything at every layer. We've done this in just a couple of weeks, which has had the side effect of massively reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is just a side effect. This wasn't intentional. This was just sort of a coincidence. It just so happens that the way to address this crisis involves reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But in responding to this crisis, reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as we have done probably more to address, to resolve global warming than we have in the past 100 years of trying to address it. So this crisis has shown us, incontrovertibly, that we are capable of responding. That this idea that we can't respond, that the systems are too big, that no one person creates them, is just a myth. And yet, why is this the one that we're responding to? Why is this the one that has captured everybody's minds? Why is this the one that has changed everybody's behavior? Why didn't we do this when we saw and became sufficiently confident in the projections for climate change? Why didn't we do this when we saw and became sufficiently confident in projections for the acceleration of development of artificial intelligence? Why didn't we do this about nuclear war? I would say, and Soryu Forel, my teacher, also says, that the main reason is that this is the one that's emotionally real for us. because this is the one that we've faced before. It's easier to understand. It's easier to understand how this bears on our life and bears on our death because we've been through it before. We've had pandemics before. We have all lived, well, we personally haven't lived through, but at least almost certainly haven't lived through the 1918 Spanish flu, and certainly none of us have lived through the 14th century Black Death. But we culturally have lived through those events, and genetically have lived through those events. And having lived through those events, that's now in our bodies. We understand on an emotional level what a pandemic means. We're able to respond to this because it's more understandable. It's easier to wrap our heads around. It's easier to respond to. It's easier to emotionally understand. But the fact that it's easier to emotionally understand because we've lived through it is actually quite concerning. Or rather should be concerning regarding global warming, regarding technological disruption. We've never lived through global warming. We've never lived through technological disruption. We don't actually know that we can live through global warming or technological disruption. But if we're living our life according to stories, ideas, imagination, understanding of things that's based in this way, then our approach, our response to things is going to be limited by our imagination. It's going to be limited by our thinking. It's going to be limited by what we are capable of seeing. And we're not capable of seeing. We're not capable of emotionally understanding global warming because it's never happened. Furthermore, this virus has made our deaths more salient to us. And we really don't like that. We really fervently worship this idea of not dying, this goal of preventing our death. Because we haven't emotionally come to terms with our death. We haven't faced our death. And therefore, we think that when we're talking about coronavirus, when we're talking about medical questions, we're talking about whether people die or not. We intellectually, of course, know better. We say that we're talking about things like quality-adjusted life years, but we emotionally, because we haven't come to terms with our own death, are talking about whether people die or not. And so we make these crazy decisions, like causing enormous suffering in order to allow someone to keep living for another few days sometimes, or a few weeks sometimes, when they've lived for 80 or more years. Why? Because we want to save their life. Of course we want to save their life, because we don't want them to die. But we're not facing that we don't have a choice about that, because we're not willing to face our own death. We're not willing to face the reality of death. We're so scared of our death that we will change our entire life to prevent our death. We'll change our entire life to prevent someone else's death. And because, again, this is all based on mental understanding, at the end of the day, push comes to shove, really to prevent us from understanding death. Which means that as people get older, we put them in places where we don't have to look at them anymore. We can forget about them and go about our day-to-day business as they are somewhere else going through the aging and death process. Therefore, it's essential that we do this, that we face this, that we face the reality of our own death, which is to say that we face the reality of our own life, which is to say that we face this moment of experience right now. We face the fear, we face the avoidance, we face the anger, we face the dissatisfaction, so that we can emotionally work through this. So that this crisis becomes something that we can take advantage of, something that we can use for the benefit of all life. So that our response to this crisis isn't just about preventing a few people from dying of a certain virus, but becomes about creating an enormous transformation, a positive transformation for the entire world, in which billions of people get to live lives that they wouldn't have otherwise lived. Because we take the momentum of responding to this crisis and direct it towards the climate crisis. Create a world in which all life is loved and cared for and respected and protected. Create a world in which the development of artificial intelligence is based on compassion for all life, is based on true understanding of reality, rather than serving economic interests, rather than serving human greed, human delusion, human preferences. That we take this heartening success of having changed our lives and we apply it to what is really happening, to the real crises that are really facing us. So how do we do this? This is, I would suggest, first of all, a very good question to ask. How do we do this? We should be asking ourselves this question every day. How do I do this? Because we see that it's not going to happen by default. By default, in all likelihood, we respond to this crisis. Coronavirus is to some extent resolved or pushed out of our minds in any case. Then we move on and go right back to producing a bunch of greenhouse gas emissions and working at jobs that are, let's face it, mostly meaningless. How do we do this? You have to ask this question. How do we do this? Of course, the beginning of the answer to this question is that we experience connection ourselves in our own experience, which begins in our own experience. Believe it or not, we experience connection prior to there being anybody else around, or at least prior to there being an idea of anybody else around. We do this by being willing to have this experience. There's one thing I've learned in my decade of meditation practice, my 5 years of monastic training, in my 1 year, let's say, of retreat time, is that connection, togetherness, is a matter of being willing to have this experience. That's it. If we're willing to have this experience, then we experience connection with all life. We experience connection with every living thing. We experience the whole world as one huge mind, in which everyone in it is just manifesting perfectly as they are. Not willing to have this experience, everything shuts down and becomes small and confused and disconnected. And we hate ourselves and we hate everyone else. And we continually think that the answer is to go further into rejection of this experience, into disconnection from ourselves, from each other. We continue to think that that's the case, but if we're just become willing to have this experience, immediately, already, everyone's there. That's the first step. It's the first way to transform this. It's the first way to transform our lives, transform our response to this, is that we ourselves become animated with that life energy of connection to all living beings. This is especially important at this time when the momentum towards traumatizing ourselves by exposing ourselves to information about the pandemic is very large. Soryu advises that we not spend more than a half hour every day taking in information on the internet about coronavirus. I can't personally recommend that because I am not doing that. I spend a little bit more time than that every day researching it. For whatever reason, I seem to be not as susceptible to panic based on information as others, according to Soryu. And so I've been leveraging that to try to understand this. But in any case, rather than spending our time traumatizing ourselves, freaking out, taking in information about this, we spend that time facing this experience, being willing to have it as it is, sitting down and just feeling our feelings. Maybe doing emotional processing of various sorts. There are many different approaches that we can use for this. In any case, we do this. At a local level, at a community level, we have to make connections with each other, with our neighbors, with those around us, and I would say actually change the way that we live so that we move into a place where we are around other people who will stay connected to us no matter what, who won't go away if they disagree with us, so that we don't have to be reliant on agreeing, so we don't have to be reliant on all sharing the same story. It's essential that we do this on a local level, in part because on a global level, what we have to do is innovate in terms of stories. On a global level, we see that we respond to the story that culture tells us. We need a new one of those. We need to face and accept and allow the death of the stories that we've been telling, the religions that we've been following for the past however long it's been, maybe all of history, if you like. We have to come up with a better story, better way of seeing things, a better religion than the religion of preventing death, the religion of preventing our own death, the religion of placing in a position of primal importance the postponement of human death. I would suggest that that's the one that's got to go now. We have to become willing to die. And we have to tell a story that is compelling of being willing to die. In particular, of being willing to die for the benefit of all life. Being willing to give up our lives for the benefit of all living beings. And in order to do this, because we acknowledge that such a story has not taken off, has not yet won, we have to be in the position of innovating in terms of stories. And in order to innovate in terms of stories, we have to have a way of being together with each other that doesn't have to do with all sharing the same stories. This is the main way that humans have organized in history. We've all found a story that we agree on, and then we live according to that story together. And we're able to accomplish enormous feats by sharing that story. Share the story of money, for example, and we're able to accomplish enormous things. Everyone agrees to believe that this fictitious quantity of dollars is real and exists. And it becomes real in a way because everyone's willing to believe that it's real and exists. But it's just a story. Out here in the Bay Area, of course, we're in kind of the epicenter of this. This is the place of the center of innovation in terms of stories on a long enough timeline. Of course, on shorter timescales, every few years or so, So if you take a few years as your time scale, it's a place of very little innovation in terms of stories. It's a place in which everybody all agrees on the same story and then lives together and all follows that story, whatever it is. So it was startups for a little while. Startups were the big story. Apps. We're going to change the world with apps. And then that kind of fell apart. People stopped believing in that story after a few years, and then that whole world kind of fell apart. There's still some remnants of it around, but for the most part, it's dead. A story of rationalism, a story of we're going to figure everything out using our heads, and that's the way that we're going to solve all the problem, brought a bunch of people together. And they were able to live together and collaborate and do, frankly, astonishing work, impressive work, highly valuable work for a few years, and then mostly fall apart. We keep seeing this pattern of people coming together around a certain story, and it goes well for a little while, and then they fall apart. Another story forms, everyone comes together around it for a little while, then it falls apart. I would suggest that if we want to make a lasting change here, we have to have a way of coming together that doesn't have to do with stories. Which means that we're willing and able to stay together, even if we disagree. And in order to do this, it's essential that we be able to experience the pain, the fear of disagreement, the pain, the fear of losing our story, which to us at the time feels like losing our life, feels like losing the universe, because our story seems to be the universe. And so every time we're wrong, it feels like we're dying, it feels like we're going to die. Have to be willing to face that. So in this way, we see individually, we sit down, we have this experience just as it is. Face the emotional body sensations, the physical body sensations of this moment. Based on this, we're able to live in a community with other people, independently of stories. That community is able to innovate, push on each other, come up with new stories, without falling apart, without breaking apart just because people disagree with each other. We have a few of those communities, they interact with each other, they innovate in terms of stories, they collaborate independently of stories. Maybe this is going to be able to come up with a story that will become compelling at the global level, that will shift our response to this crisis and to the much greater crises that are facing us, so that we can transform the entire world, so that we can build a world that's kind to everyone, a world that's compassionate to everyone, a world in which no one is special, a world in which, as Forel said to me, and as has become clear to me over this past few weeks, a world in which no one is killed and everyone dies. Create such a world, the ultimate goal of this path, of this community, of this life, that we become willing to die. So we'll now spend some time taking the next concrete step. Spend a little bit of time sitting together and feeling the feelings of this moment. Not thinking about them, not thinking about anything else. Just feeling this moment of experience. Practice together in this way for a little while, and then we'll move into some more of an interactive discussion. Once again, let's establish an upright posture. Base stable, connected with the earth. Sacrum rooted into that stable base, not too far forward or back. Center of the body centered, balanced, not too far left or right, not too far front or back. Heart, sacrum, solar plexus, open, forward and up. And crown of the head elevated. Our chin is slightly tucked. The back of our neck is open. Our spine grows up towards the sky. And take a little bit of time to establish this posture. Because in order to facilitate our attending to feelings as they are, we will have the option of using this next little while, 20 minutes or so, as a strong determination sit. A sit in which we don't move at all. So take a little bit of time now, establish a clear, upright posture, and in particular one that you will hold for the next little while, no matter what. Again, it's optional. You don't need to do this. You can take care of your own body. Move if it's appropriate to move at this time. But as an option of the possibility of making a firm commitment, strong determination, not to move, no matter what. Not to intentionally move whatsoever. Having determined what's appropriate for your practice, for where you're at, just experience body sensations as they are. There's no choice to feel this body sensation. So feel it. Say yes to it. If there's pain, say yes to the pain. Welcome it. Let it in. It's here to tell you about your life. It's here to tell you about your death. So forget about any stories about it, just experience it. There's joy. Let that in. Can't prevent that joy anymore. You have to face that in this moment. Feel a huge joy, inexplicable joy. Doesn't make any sense. We just have to face it. Whatever it is that comes up, shame, fear, sadness, hatred, love, discomfort, comfort, cold, hot. Just face all of it. We're lost in stories, just go back to the body sensations. That's it. No time to think about being lost in stories. Just this moment. Body, body, body. Feels like it's gonna kill us. Let it kill us. That's it. Nothing else to do. Better die than move forward, ignoring this experience. self and world cleaned off. Each next body, mind cleaned off. By saying yes to this directly. Don't know how to do it, face that. Face that we don't know how to pay attention to this moment of body sensations. Say yes to that. experiencing the great mystery of this moment. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. There's just a couple minutes left. Now, pay attention to body sensations without moving, in fact, without thinking. So try and mute us and then unplug the microphone.
Mute us.
So mute and then unplug the mic and then unmute. Just click on the microphone there. Okay, so nice to practice with you for a little while. And now we have some time for discussion. So any questions, comments, reports, anything at all that anyone would like to share with the group right now, now's the time. And you're also welcome to continue in silence.
With regards to the whole world where no one is killed and everyone dies, wouldn't it be better if no one is killed and no one dies but for real this time? Where, like, I understand that it is terrible to cause immense suffering or even kill simply to postpone death, but if there's no point to a death, if it isn't of benefit to any living beings, and if postponing it doesn't harm anyone, would it not make sense to live as long as one can? If not forever, which is almost certainly impossible due to heat death of the universe, but one can have hope even as one gives that hope more probability than it deserves.
Yeah, there's nothing in particular wrong with living a long life. I hope nothing I said suggested that there was. Again, it's just a matter of, are we doing appropriate actions to live a long life, healthy and joyful, or are we really, at the end of the day, trying to avoid death? So Hakuin, Eikaku. You know Hakuin?
Who?
So Hakuin was a Zen master in the 18th century in Japan. Very impressive figure. All of the existing Rinzai Zen lines trace back to him, I believe. And he, at his time, put some effort into what you might call life extension research. At that time, in the form of Taoist practices. Naturally different from modern medicine, but much of the same basic point and with similar results for those who take them on sincerely. Both, of course, in terms of living a long, full, natural life, and also, so at that time, the Taoist practices were making quite large claims about what was possible with that approach. And in particular, we're claiming that it was possible to live for something like 800 years if you take on these various life extension techniques.
This must be where the self-cultivation stories come from, but go on.
This is where?
There's a genre of stories about like self-cultivation where those practices actually live up to their claims and are quasi-magic, but continue.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So exactly, they actually do, you could say, live up to their claims if you take them on as self-cultivation. And as you may have been indicating, if you by the way, a little bit of camera sound. So maybe there's a way to make that softer. I don't know if that's possible for you to mute. I think it's from you, Daniel.
What? Should I mute myself?
Yeah, just mute while I'm talking and then you unmute to talk. So there is, of course, you could say on the face of it, it's impossible to live 800 years. But if part of what the practices are achieving is that you're experiencing more in each moment, which is a completely reasonable thing to expect, something that many of us have experienced, maybe even we just experienced a couple of minutes ago, moments having more experiences in them than we expected. This can actually, in a way, be an honest, subjective representation, as you were saying, if you take it on as self-cultivation. So Hakuin, in any case, was doing this stuff and realized at some point that although he could take these practices on, practice them wholeheartedly, and live an 800-year life, subjectively perhaps, there wasn't any point to it. Because the actual stuff of life, the actual purpose of life is service, is love, is service to all living beings. And so he devoted himself to that instead, and only lived to be, I don't know how old, maybe 80, 70 or 80 or something like that. So not that old, and yet still quite old. Go ahead.
That obviously makes sense of, yes, people should be willing to die if it is of benefit to all living beings on net, obviously.
So it's just being emotionally willing to do that. That's the main challenge.
I agree. That is challenging for beings that have evolved to preserve their own life and their own genes above all else.
Yeah, right.
Tanir, isn't there, to kind of continue on that, a concept in this path where if you free yourself from the fear of death, you live a more full and joyful life, right? You're no longer encumbered by your fear of death.
Yeah, practically speaking, that does seem to be what happens. The extent that we are able to transcend that, we experience more fulfillment, more joy, a more full life. We actually strangely live longer by not worrying about our death. Strangely, it doesn't make sense. I was confused about this. I asked Soryu at some point, and it was towards the end of my first year of training. I asked him why, it was something like why so it's like if I were to just do the practice and not think about things, wouldn't I just walk out into the road and get hit by a car, and wouldn't that be terrible? This seems like a reasonable question. It just turns out to be the case that you don't. And that is actually quite mysterious.
Yeah, you become more functional, not less functional, it seems, the more you accept reality.
Yeah, usually. Of course, some people are already doing a really good job being functional, and then they start accepting the reality that they're overextending themselves, and then they just stop doing that and become quite a bit less functional, although perhaps with less externalities in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's also, of course, really possible to damage ourselves in the course of doing the training. Hakuin actually did that. He went through a period of time in striving to go beyond the fear of death, go beyond, in fact, all stories. He actually got what's called meditation sickness or Zen sickness, and had to spend some time just healing himself from that. So it's possible that our exertions can have those sorts of consequences as well.
Could you, if other people don't have a topic, could you describe that a little more in detail? Zen sickness or meditation sickness?
Well, I don't know that other people don't have a topic, but maybe I'll say very briefly. He talks about this in the Yasen Kana. Idle Talk on the Night Boat is how it's translated into English. And it's basically just a text about the healing that he did from that situation. He describes his symptoms. So his head was always hot, his feet were always cold, no matter how many layers of socks and boots he was wearing. He heard rushing wind sound in his ears all day long. He was sickly, confused, scared, that sort of thing. That was how it showed up for him.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anything else?
Good afternoon, group. This is Pam.
Hi, Pam.
Hi. I don't do strong determination sits, but I sure did with this group today. So thank you. It feels wonderful set up the way you did. I wanted to do it, to stay with what I was feeling. And then when I went into thought, didn't think about the going into thought, just came back. It was extraordinary. I feel like I'm on retreat. Feels so good.
Wonderful.
I have been, there's many things you said that have made big impressions on me. I'm in healthcare, and we'll leave that aside, but the people I work with in the healthcare pharmacy that I work in, we have different stories. And sometimes I feel intensely lonely because my story that I tell myself about the situation is different than theirs, particularly with this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so this week I've taken control of my personal safety according to what I'm following, and have found it a lot easier to be around everybody and to be helpful. And that turned out to be really important because one of the senior owners passed away last night, and we all needed to be there for each other, unified this morning.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this, and I feel very, very connected right now. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That really pulls you together. I'm sorry to hear. Thank you. Is that Margaret?
Yes, Joshin, it is. It's so nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Amazing.
Yeah, and I see Pian. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Margaret, for those who don't know, is one of our very long-time Burlington community members, one of the original people who made it possible for us to do this, and who supported Soryu and the community for a long time.
I'm not one of the original, but I'm the last man standing.
Yeah.
Originals.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
I have a couple of things I'd like to say, which is thank you very much for your talk and for the strong sit. And I did experience a feeling of, at several points in that time period, I knew I had breath, but I wasn't sure I had a body, which is perfect for me. I mean, I consider that a peak experience in meditation that I really appreciate. And on the subject of facing and accepting our death, I was with my mom for an extended period of time in 2017 when she passed away at 97 years old. And I thought, boy, did she do a good job. I was really moved by my mother's courage and determination to do a good job, because that's the kind of person she was. And even in the assisted living where she was, even the nurses and the hospice workers said, well, your mom is going to be proper until she takes her last breath. And that's exactly what happened. And it was very impressive. It made a big impression on me.
Yeah.
And then, as you probably know, that last year on January 3rd, my most precious son, Blair, died unexpectedly. And once I regained some level of sanity after that, if may say a few months later, I remember having this feeling of, good, now I don't have to worry about dying anymore. Okay? I was like, okay, these things that I'm so attached to, these people that keep me fearful of dying, I'm going to leave them, I'm going to miss them, things like that. I was really relieved in a way, obviously not relieved that my son had passed, but it gave me a buoyant feeling of freedom. But now I notice, I actually particularly just tonight in your talk, I thought I seem to have drifted away from that feeling of freedom and gotten back. Now I actually care if I live or die. Well, I always care that I live, but I remember thinking I don't want to die. And so I find that interesting, that feeling of freedom that I had for, say, several months, and I will probably get back now that I'm going to think about it more, but it didn't last.
Yeah.
I dug in again. I curled my toes into the earth again and said, no, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that it comes and goes.
Yeah, it is, exactly, that it comes and goes. Really grateful for sharing that, for you sharing.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's great.
Yeah, my experience, I of course wouldn't say that I've been that intimate with death personally yet. It just so happens that I haven't lost anyone very close to me in that way. But still, in my own way, I've had that kind of experience of, you do some work, you clear it out, your mind clears up, your body clears up. And I know for one time I got off a solo retreat and got onto a plane. And planes are usually places where I'm of the opinion that I'm going to die. I just believe that, even though I rationally know that that's not true. In all likelihood, it always feels like I'm going to die. And I got on the plane after this extended retreat, and the plane took off, and I had the same opinion and emotional sense, I'm going to die. There was no fear whatsoever. It's just, I'm going to do the practice and find out what comes next. Here we go. And then, sure enough, as you say, later on, I find myself getting on a different plane after having been in the Bay Area for a while, and I'm afraid of dying again. So what? I came back. But as you are aware, what doesn't come back is the awareness, or what doesn't leave rather, is the awareness that that's conditioned. You now know, as you say, I'll get back there.
Some things you can't forget completely, right?
It comes and goes, but the awareness that this state of mind of being afraid of death is conditionally arisen. It will fall off. Keep that.
So, would you call these types of events, these realizations, a form of awakening, and then they wane, like you said, but leave a remnant behind, like for you to hold on to, that you can return back to, and slowly, as you progress, you continue to deepen that awakening, and it becomes more of a permanent condition?
I wouldn't necessarily say that those are awakening. I think they're obviously an important step and of great value. I wouldn't say that that is awakening in particular, or that that is enlightenment in particular. It's helpful, of course, to gain insight into this dependent origination. Maybe it would culminate in awakening. I don't know. But generally speaking, I'm more interested in what this moment's awakening is.
Could you repeat that last sentence? What this moment?
Generally speaking, I'm more interested in this moment's awakening. What is the awakening in this moment?
Mm.
What is transcending stories, self, other, world, body, mind right now? How I come to life completely right now? How I die completely right now?
Thank you.
And how do we come to life completely and die right now? Because it isn't so much about me or you. Harada Roshi said at one time that if you awaken, the whole world awakens with you. In the moment of your own awakening, every living being awakens.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
I can. Oh, Yasmina, hi. So nice to.
Yes?
Yes, I see you now. Great, so nice to see you. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I find myself living in community during this time. And yeah, I had invited some friends to come and stay with me for a week or two as they were transitioning to live here full time. And then the orders happened and nobody's showing housing. And so here we are living in community. 6 of us, a couple and 2 kids. So I was wondering about, I guess I just want to reflect on what I'm noticing in my practice, including today. I'm going to use the word dissolving. Like I feel like I'm dissolving into just feelings of rage, sadness, all just these things that I'm, rather than being in the story of it, just feeling it. Like, I don't even know why I'm sharing that. I'm just sharing that. So my question is, if you have any insights about practices that are supporting you there, sort of maybe practices or even strategies about, how we live in community when all of this is alive. I'm dealing with a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old, and there's a couple, then there's my teenage son. So I have the whole range, well, not the whole range, but I have a wide range of humanity here in this community now that I'm living in for the unforeseen amount of time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds great. I wish we could. I would love to just have us be together right now physically, our communities, but maybe we have to wait a little bit for that. So the question is just sort of what practices have been helpful around here, or in general, maybe what practices.
Yeah, like yes. I mean, I'm making an assumption that maybe some of you are evolving on moments and things as well. And so, yeah, what happens when you live in community, these are very conscious people, and how do any tips from the field there?
That's a great question. Well, naturally, I think everyone here is to some extent in a position to answer that question. So maybe in a little bit we have opportunity for you all to share. I'll just maybe start off and say so first of all, above all else, we accept that things will be messy. If we're in community together, then things are going to be messy. Just accept that. And find, to the maximum extent possible, a kind of beauty in that messiness. Going through the real stuff of life, and that's beautiful. Even if it's challenging, still it's beautiful. So in that said, next thing is that I've found it helpful to have a structure to lean on. So in terms of, so around here, the structure takes a very definite shape, and that doesn't have to be what a structure is. That's just one way to do it. Generally speaking, you want some kind of structure. Around here, it's quite a well-defined and even rigid one. There's a schedule, and we're doing something at each part of the day. And moving from thing to thing continually helps us gradually break up our mental patterns. It's too hard to stay mad at someone or whatever it is, or to stay in the mindset of victim or aggressor or whatever the thing is. It's too much of it. Our minds aren't capable of maintaining that through, now we're chanting, now we're sitting, now we're exercising, now we're cooking, now we're eating, now we're working, now we're sitting, now we're eating. It's just so many different contexts, and our minds aren't able. It's maybe we can do it, but we have to really try, and it becomes obvious that we're doing it. And at a certain point, that falls off, just from moving the thing to thing. So maybe that looks like, everyone sits together for an hour in the morning, you have a meal together, you cook a meal together, whatever it is, whatever is feasible, whatever makes sense, on up to a full monastic schedule, if that makes sense, who knows. Just find the structure and lean on whatever structure is already there, to whatever extent you can. The kind of intelligence in that can take over when human intelligence isn't functioning so well. There's a kind of intelligence in the structure. Next thing, of course, everyone, it's very helpful anyway if everyone is upholding ethical standards. Everyone's made commitments to, for example, not kill. Very helpful if people can agree on that basic level about things. But it's not that you're agreeing on a story about things, but you're agreeing on ethical principles that you will live by, that you will uphold. And then there's a lot more that I could say along those lines, but maybe we'll take just,
Thank you.
yeah, maybe just up to 30 seconds a person. Anyone around here has anything that they would like to share, practices or structures that have been helpful? Again, up to 30, we'll be conscious of time, but feel free to share.
Mental meditations.
Great.
I would say that one of the huge advantages of monastic communities I've lived in over other communities has been the forced time to just sit with your emotions and just be with them. It's very easy when you don't have that to go and distract yourself, playing a game or thinking about how angry you are or doing something else. So kind of having that forced time. And and also the underlying orientation towards finding learning in anything.
Great.
Hello, Yasmina and everyone. I find that the circling practice, it's an interpersonal relating practice that you know well, has been incredibly transformative. Check-ins, where you just have a set amount of time and everybody's in a circle and you go around and everybody just gets to share what they're feeling, what their experience is like, how they're doing. Yeah, having physical exercise is really useful to help somatically work through blockages. And finally, just once in a while, taking a walk by yourself or with another, if it can be done in a safe way in the place that you're at. Just having another person to take a walk with, share with, and or doing that yourself, getting out into nature.
And where everyone shares what they feel, what they're grateful for could be helpful too.
Okay, great. If you'd like to share, it's okay. If not, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
Like a gratitude practice.
Sorry? What was that?
I think I heard gratitude breakfast.
Oh, gratitude breakfast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
All right.
So wonderful.
Joshin, I think things.
Yeah.
Something like messy is beautiful and structure.
Yeah.
But one of the things I missed it.
Oh, yeah.
The second thing was?
So ethical precepts of some sort, ethical standards of some sort.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I hope of benefit to many people.
And we'll have a recording of this on YouTube soon, so you can review if you want.
So I think in the interest of time, we will now wrap up. So Han, is there any announcements that we should be making?
Yes, hello everyone, lovely to be with you. I wanted to let you know that there's been a plan, there's been a plan in the works for months now, and it's coming closer to fruition to set up a program where we as residents here are able to connect with other folks such as yourselves in a way that's embodying the practice and really holding space mindfully. This would involve connection, and we had originally envisioned doing it more in person, but of course now with the circumstances, it looks like moving towards holding space and being together in a state of practice using this kind of face-to-face technology remotely. So please stay tuned for more details about this. We're hoping to do a pilot project with it where we're going to get started and then try and learn about it. So more details coming forth. Stay tuned. And yeah, I'm really excited about it personally. I think it'll be a wonderful opportunity to deepen relationships and to make space and to build this community.
One-on-one.
Yes, one-on-one. We're envisioning this as a one-on-one interaction between one of the residents or apprentices and other members in the community as a sort of way to connect and hopefully be of service to people in the community.
Great. Very exciting. Hoping to talk with a lot more with you soon. Again, thanks for coming to this. Thank you for practicing. So important that we practice, that we continue to gather in community, and that we support each other. So we'll now formally end the event, but I'll stick around for a little while and we can talk more informally for a little bit of time, maybe about current world events, actions that we can take, or anything else. So, take good care of yourselves, keep practicing, and looking forward to connecting as we continue.